Hey everybody, Grommel's here with some more War Thunder historic battle action. Well, patch 1.35 is on the horizon and brings a few changes with it. Some of the planes I wanted to fly for a video will get changed either in their tiering or updates to their flight model. So with those changes close by, I think I postpone them till the new patch arrives to fly them with the new tiering or flight model. And till then, I take a look at a few planes I like to fly simply because they are fun. This time I take a look at the Ju-87 T5. The plane is on tier 5 in the German tree and it is of course a dive bomber, but also has the reputation on the forum of being, and I quote, the best German tier 5 turn fighter. Well, there are no fighters on tier 5 on the German tree right now, so the competition for this title is somewhat slim. But even if there were, the T5 would most likely qualify. The plane can turn very well. Well, let's take a look at it. The Ju-87 is a pretty big single-engine two-seater plane with a fixed landing gear, which makes it very slow. It has a very large and thick wing though, which means even though the plane is pretty heavy, thanks to the large wing area, the wing loading of the plane is actually pretty low, about the same level as a Hurricane. That is why the Ju-87 turns well in War Thunder. Now there would be of course a few other factors that are important for turning in reality. For example, the force required to pull the stick. A bigger plane has bigger control surfaces, and the more you pull on them, the more drag they produce, and the harder it gets to pull any further. Something that does not really matter in a game, of course. I simply do not know how much this would affect the Stuka though. Another thing would be structural strength. A lot of bombers simply could not withstand the G-load and would break apart, even without overspeeding. As a dive bomber though, the Ju-87 is designed to handle high G-loads when pulling out from a dive, so I don't think there's a problem there. Now the plane's weight and drag, caused by the large wing and fixed landing gear of course, mean it has a very bad energy retention in a turn, so it will get very slow very fast, something to keep in mind. Well, a word on how I use the T5 and why I do so. The Ju-87 is of course designed to attack ground targets. However, I don't think it is particularly effective in this role for a few reasons. First, it does not carry many bombs and it is very slow, so getting new ones takes a long time. The T5 has of course very effective 20mm cannons and a lot of ammo for them, so it can do a lot of damage with those, as long as the enemy team leaves you alone, but it usually won't. Going for ground targets with the cannons means you are most likely low and slow, even for the Ju-87 standards. Other bombers are also slower than fighters, but by not as much, so they have a better chance of getting away. The Stuka can turn well initially, so you can maybe avoid an attack or two, but with its bad energy retention, you will soon be too slow to keep maneuvering if you don't have some altitude to regain some energy. And the last and maybe most important point in this case, a lot of bigger planes, mostly multi-engine ones in War Thunder, get a boost to their damage resistance, giving them the ability to soak up a pretty large amount of fire. That helps you defend the plane with the rear gunner while your plane takes fire. The Stuka does not get this boost. It, as a matter of fact, can't take more damage than the average single-engine fighter on this tier, but is a much larger target. Trying to fend off attackers with the rear gun rarely works on the Ju-87. You simply can't take enough damage to make this work most of the time. So in short, I feel the plane simply lacks the defensive capabilities to survive as a cannon-armed ground attack plane, and the bomb load to be really effective as a bomber. However, with its good initial maneuverability and for its tier very effective cannon armament, the plane is in fact very good in the offensive. So what I like to do is use the D5 in what I like to call a fire support role. For example, wait for a furball to develop and then dive into it, and use the cannon and the maneuverability of the plane to go for one target after the other in quick succession. Or, probably more important, help with taking out resilient targets like the Beaufighter, as there are few planes in the German tree around this level that have the necessary firepower to do that effectively. The Ju-87 has not the speed to catch most of those targets, but most of the time you either enter an ongoing fight, or your target comes to you. Few people run away from a Stuka. Well then, let's take a look at a few examples. Here we are on Sicily and approaching 3 Beaufighters below us that are attacking another Ju-87. I want to dive down on them and do as much damage as I can. It would be nice to save the other Ju-87 in the process, but taking the bow's firepower into account, it is extremely unlikely that I get there in time. One of the bow crashes though for unknown reason, that leaves 2. I go for the one in the rear. Here the Stuka's dive brakes come in handy. With the engines throttled back and the brakes out, you can dive down a long way without having to fear to get too fast in the end. I get a few good hits on the wing, and with the brakes retracted and the engine at full again, I simply climb away. It wasn't enough to shoot the bow down, but at least he's damaged enough that he's returning to base, so I have free rein with the second one. He seems to be busy with an AI plane, so I can simply roll in behind him and start firing. And even though I could not save the Ju-87, I am at least fast enough to save the AI biplane. After he went down, I tried to catch up with the damaged Beaufighter for a short while, but he's just too fast. Well, let's take a look at a quick example for what I said earlier with needing some altitude to regain speed in this plane. There is a 109 close to me and a bit higher and engaged with a D520 and a Spitfire, and I want to help him. I hope he can stay alive and keep them busy long enough for me to get close and bring my guns to bear. But the Spitfire takes out the 109 and now he's coming for me. The D520 seems to go for someone else for now. But I am very slow from my climb, I can't maneuver at all like this, so I have to dive. The Stuka of course can't outrun a Spitfire, dive or not. The dive is only to gain energy to turn. He follows me, and after reaching about 500 kph, I roll a bit and pull out of the dive pretty hard. Never pull out without rolling a bit, as you will fly straight through his gun sights if you do. The pull out makes him overshoot, and then I loop around. He also turns, but I had built up enough speed in the dive that I have enough energy left to do another vertical move. I would have to dive again before I can make a third one. This time he is a little slower with his turn and I can get my guns around faster. He tries to dive under my fire, but I get a hit and follow with a split S. He tries to turn away from me and I get a few good hits in a deflection shot that take off his wing. But now the D520 is right behind me and I am once again pretty slow, and I have only about 500 meters of altitude left to play with. I should have used it all up to regain speed right away, but I did not, and when I evaded in a high yo-yo I got too slow and all my maneuverability is lost. Now I try to dive and regain speed, but it is too late. It takes too long and there is hardly enough altitude to get fast enough before I have to pull, and he gets a hit in. So you can see, while the D5 is a great turner initially, after a few turns you need to be able to dive a bit and regain speed. So you always want to have a bit of an altitude buffer when dogfighting in it, especially when dogfighting single engine planes. As I have said earlier, that is one of the reasons why I don't like using the plane in a ground attack role. as you will rarely have enough altitude to keep your maneuverability up should you get jumped, and neither the speed nor the armor to have much hope of surviving any other way. Well then, let's take a look at a few fights on the hardest day map, because what better plane to escort a bunch of Heinkel 111s than a Ju-87? This round was one of the first I played in the D5 in HB. My team is keeping most of the enemy team busy, so I decide to go for those that are attacking our 111s. Two Beaufighters and a Spitfire are attacking the AI as well as a player-controlled bomber. But they don't seem to be aware of my presence until it is too late. Benefit of being a bomber myself on this map. My minimap icon looks the same than the 111's. This together with the cloud cover and their non-existent top cover give me the ability to approach them pretty much undetected. I got one of the Beaufighters earlier and the second one seems to be damaged. But one of the tail gunners apparently shot a hole in my cooling system, so I want to hurry up a bit before my engine starts giving me trouble. The damaged bow and the Spitfire are going for a S-79 and the Spitfire again does not notice my approach. The S-79 turns away from the Beaufighter behind him, and apparently the bow is too damaged to follow. The Spitfire turns into the bomber, and I get him just when he is about to fire on it, and I end up with the bow in front of my guns again. I can get a few more hits in and I avenge my shot up cooling system by taking out the gunner that caused the damage. The bow goes down and crashes eventually, and while I'm on the way to help the rest of my team out, I run into another Spitfire moving away from the fight, most likely also damaged. So I finish him off while I'm at it, so he can't repair and cause us trouble later. I'm on the clock after all with my damaged cooling system and I can't repair. By now my team has dealt with most of the planes left on the opposing team, and just in time for my engine to quit they get the last one. Now let's take a look at another match. Here I have a Typhoon Mark 1A coming for me pretty early in the match. Now the Typhoon turns okay for a boom and zoom plane, but of course nothing like a Spitfire, Hurricane or a Stuka for that matter. So I know if he tries to turn with me I won't have any trouble. If he goes for boom and zoom I have to play Energy Vampire. In either case, with the low damage resistance of the D5, I prefer not to be disturbed by another plane while I am turning, so I draw the Typhoon away from the fight a bit. I go up to a little over 500 kph before I started to turn, and the Typhoon indeed decides to try to turn fight. And as expected, the plane simply can't turn tight enough to win a fight like this versus the T5. I am not used to the fast speed of the target, so I don't give it enough lead at first, but this mistake is easily rectified and the Typhoon goes down. Now my team seems to have the upper hand in the fight over the channel, so I go after the 111s, which are under attack by an unknown number of planes. When I get there, at first I see only a Wellington, but when I am about to start my attack on it, a Beaufighter appears, turning towards me. I also turn towards him, and then put the nose down to build up some speed and get ready to turn fight. As he starts to fire, I pull up in a tight high yo-yo, and when he comes around and passes me, I roll into a split S and go after him. He rolls in the other direction, apparently pulling negative Gs. As I come around and get closer to having my guns pointing at him, he rolls back again and turns into me, but I can see that he can't get the guns pointed at me. A good opportunity to fire at the bow's front. A weak point on this plane. Aiming for it often hits the cockpit and takes out the pilot, as in this case. Now my team has won the fight over the channel and is also arriving on the scene. The only plane left on the opponent's team is the Wellington, and two 109s go for him, but they have a little mishap while doing so, so I finish the Wellington off. Now, one last hardest day match, a very similar situation than the last time. This time a bow fighter is going for me at the start of the match, and again I want to draw him away a bit before I start attacking. I pull up in a loop, and when I come down he also goes vertical and goes up in a looping. When he is coming down, I roll a bit to be able to turn more into the same direction he will be facing after the loop. Now I turn after him, and when he passes on top of my plane, I again roll a bit and go into a slight low yo-yo to gain a bit of an advantage, and also because putting the nose down a bit in a low yo-yo gets you some speed back. Doing that twice is enough to get the lead to fire a burst, and this burst is enough to take him out. Not something you see a lot when shooting a bow fighter, without hitting the cockpit. Now a Beaufort bomber is coming my way, but I can't catch him, so I move back towards the main fight. There I see another D5 fighting a Hurricane. The D5 seems to be on top of things, so I want to go straight after the 111s. The Hurricane seems to be moving away from the Ju-87 though, and I don't want him to escape, so I decide to give him a quick burst when I pass him. I get a good hit on his wing, and that is all I need. That should be enough for the other D5 to catch him and finish him off, while I hope I can catch up to the 111s while there are still some left. There is another Hurricane, a bow fighter and a Beaufort left on the enemy team, and while I show the rest of the fight, there are a few things I want to add about the D5 Stuka. Now, the plane is a lot of fun, and as you can see can hold its own in a dogfight quite well and dish out some damage in a fire support role. However, the Stuka is still much too slow and its energy retention too bad to be considered a good fighter. A lot of the success that the plane currently enjoys in War Thunder air-to-air combat is based on the fact that a lot of people just see it as a bomber and willingly enter a turnfight with it. That is something you have to keep in mind. If a fighter engages in the vertical doing boom and zoom or energy fighting style, you will have a lot harder time. A similar thing is true for the IL-2 by the way, which I may also make a video about. Currently very few people though fight the Stuka in the vertical, so if you wonder why I don't show you a fight of what happens when someone just does boom and zoom against this plane, the reason is simply that in 3 days of flying this plane nobody tried. Either way, I wanted to fly the plane mostly because I thought it would be fun, and it most certainly was. Well, that's it for this video. I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I see you next time.